Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joined the call, and welcome to this Workday webinar. My name is Craig Todd. I'm from Workday here in Australia, and today I'm joined by Chris Phair, who's head of HR operations for Johnson & Johnson, and he's going to take us through his experience of implementing Workday across the Asia Pacific region over the last couple of months. So with that, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time today. As Craig explained, I'm just going to help us to go through the Johnson & Johnson project journey as we went through and implemented Workday. What I'm hoping to cover today in the slides is firstly a bit of an overview of who Johnson & Johnson is, and then we'll go into the implementation of how we rolled it out across our 14 countries in Asia Pacific, talk a bit about what worked and what could have been better, and then I'm going to give you an overview of how we set up our operations with the shared service, bit of the day-to-day operations, and then the Workday release management. And if there's time at the end, we'll open the floor to any open questions. So firstly, thinking about Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson is the largest healthcare company in the world, founded in 1886, and everyone's very common, you know most of the consumer products, the baby powders, the Band-Aids, and so forth. We operate across 175 countries, and it's a combination of 250 operating companies, and it's about 130,000 employees worldwide. The important point in this is in most of our countries, especially in Asia Pacific, when I go in to implement, there's a number of Johnson & Johnson companies. So for example, in China, there were 12 Johnson & Johnson companies. They don't necessarily talk to each other. They obviously all report into the same head office, but part of our implementation was not only implementing in the country, but bringing all those countries together. So looking at our rollout, we did our rollout in 3 phases. Firstly, we did the first group of countries in the light blue colour, and they were the 6 countries, commonly known within J&J as the Asia 6. And I would tend to say it was more like a pilot group for us. We were setting out to see how would Workday go in these markets. It was the first time Johnson & Johnson was going into a cloud-based application. Suffice to say, it was very successful. And based on the great implementation, the implementation took about 8 months with those markets. They're pretty small populations. We didn't actually do any payroll integrations with those markets. We just more or less did payroll reports to the local vendors. And once those were implemented, it was a great success, very positive from both employees and managers and the leadership team. We got the go-ahead to move ahead. And so then we went into the next 5 countries, and you can see they're more in the grey buckets, and we started to get into the bigger populations. We got China, 10,000, Japan, 4,500, Australia, New Zealand, 2,500. With these countries, the difference in the implementation was we started to do payroll integrations, so integrate Workday directly to the payroll systems. And at the same time, we went back to the previous 6 countries and also set up those payroll integrations for the larger of those Asia 6. And then finally, just recently this year, in April, we went live with the last 3 countries, India, Singapore and Malaysia. Successful go live. And it really, with those 3 countries going live, it tied out the whole of the region for us. We're now live with Workday in the 14 market.
If I think about our Workday implementation, the actual implementation of Workday is the easy piece. Workday, if you're not too familiar with the system, it's a cloud-based solution, very easy to implement, short implementation times. My background is implementing SAP, more ERP implementations, take a lot longer time. But one of the things with any implementation, it isn't actually just the system that you're implementing. And so when we looked at our project, and we call our project Project Sunrise, we look across like 5 pillars or 5 areas in terms of our implementation. Firstly, we say, what is our organization going to look like? In the previous slide, we talked about 250 operating companies. So in a lot of countries, there's more than 1 operating company. Here in Australia, we have 4 operating companies, but part of our change as we implemented Workday was to have a 1 HR organisation and therefore have a cross-sector or cross-company shared service organisation. So we're establishing that at the same time. The second area, policy and process harmonisation. This by far is the biggest area of work. And that is trying to ensure that all your companies in the one country have the same policies. And some policies are fairly easy to harmonise, some take time and will take years because there's a big cost in harmonising policies. And so things we harmonise, obviously absence, compensation, employee contracts, termination policies, all those kind of things we brought together as one policy per country. And then as we rolled in, we did the same process. And processes are pretty easy to harmonise. If I was to show you our hire and termination process in J&J, it wouldn't be very different to what your companies are doing right now. Then we established a change in communication teams and working through, how do we get people engaged into the project and how to ensure that when it's delivered is a positive outcome. Then obviously it's the system. Let's put in Workday, have the one system, the source of truth for all HR data and use it. And then finally, being a US company, or actually it'd be applicable to your companies, we need to ensure that the solution we're putting in follows our SOX requirements and we have all the right standard operating procedures, and DCMs is our acronym for document control matrices. So when we're implementing Workday, we look at it across these 5 areas as we go forward. Obviously, when the outcome we want, there's different outcomes from different groups. With our leaders, we want them to have the right data to make the better decisions. One of the biggest problems we had in J&J was the management of talent. We would have examples where you would have a marketing manager in the pharmaceutical company leaving because there's no opportunity. At the same time, a medical company in the same country was hiring a marketing director. And we couldn't see that visibility across those 2 companies. So bringing it all together on the one system gave the visibility in the data. Obviously, the employees wanted a consistent, easy-to-use system. And the Workday system, it's fantastic. It's on your mobile device, but it's kind of expected. In this day and age, an employee should be able to update their information. It should be real-time, cloud-based on their device. And obviously, with HR, being able to see all the data, not only within your country, but able to see the talent of employees in other countries. And it really just helps us as a business to be more agile, because who knows what's next in terms of the business growth and where we need to go. In terms of our project, we split our project into 2. One was enterprise-wide, and so every employee in Johnson & Johnson uses Workday for performance and succession planning. And so that was rolled out across all 130,000 employees, and then the bottom half is the core. And then we started the phase rollout of core, and what we mean by core is really the hire to retire life cycle of an employee, the employee data, benefits, compensation, absence management, time and attendance integration, payroll integration, and recruiting integration. Although Workday does have its own recruiting module, we continue to use Taleo. We integrate to Taleo. In terms of payroll, we harmonized each payroll solution at a country level. So every country needed to have one payroll vendor or one in-house payroll system, and we integrate to that payroll system. We had previously tried to have a more regional approach to payroll, and it didn't work for us. And so we went back to a local or a country-based payroll system. We do absence, time off and leave in Workday, compensation, year-round comp changes, and we're now coming close to implementing year-end comp changes. There's very little in Workday for benefits within the region. Mainly we use benefits for the management of dependents and how that feeds into our benefits providers, and obviously employee data, your contact information, name information, and so forth. So that was the scope of the project. In terms of training, we've gone through the full cycle of training. Like the first time we went live, we did face-to-face employee training, face-to-face manager training. The feedback from the employees was not required. No one taught me how to use Facebook. I can learn it myself. And so since our first launch, our employee training is a lot more scaled down. We effectively send out an employee an email to say, you're live now on Workday, please log in and go for it. We do a bit more manager training face-to-face, and this is really not so much it's hard for the managers to understand the transactions in Workday. It's more that the manager needs to understand the policy decisions around the transactions. when do I do a comp change for an employee? What happens if the comp change of the employee is outside the range for that job? In doing a requisition, how do I go about getting the correct approval for headcount and those things? In all countries, we set up contests at the start of the launch, and those who log in, and we capture their logins, iPads and Kindles and things like that, just to encourage them to log in and update their data as we go forth. And we put together, obviously, frequently asked questions, and we have, launch materials as we go around the offices. And then, the celebrations across all the countries as we go live. So that was really just a brief background on what we went live with and across the countries. In terms of implementations, the stuff that works well. So as I said, Workday is fairly easy as a tool to implement, and you can do a quick implementation. But one of the key, and this is all, you'd all be aware in project management, is keeping the scope fixed and not really having that scope creep as you go forward. So in most cases, when I enter a new country, I recommend a very narrow scope and that ensures the success of the project. It gets Workday into the system, and then you can start adding on all the extra things. You don't want little things like extending your project timeline as you go forward. Workday connectivity has been great, desktop and mobile, in all the countries, the 14 countries in the region. We haven't had any issues of people connecting to a cloud-based application. The employee and the management, they love the engagement. It kind of meets where people are in terms of technology. It looks great, and they like engaging with it. One of the big strengths of Workday is, we say no customization. Obviously, you can configure to your own country's business processes in your field, but if you go ahead and you're on Workday, Johnson & Johnson is on exactly the same Workday system as you. Unlike other systems where, as a customer, you can configure it or customize it and it goes away from the vanilla system, everyone is on the same Workday system. And this is perfect for a company like Johnson & Johnson who loves to customize everything to the point where they become unworkable. And so in majority of cases, I would have to say 98% of the time, Workday delivers what we need. Yes, there are some things that are not there, but one of the strengths of Workday is the updates, and that's the next bullet point. Twice a year, Workday gets updated. So when I launched the first 6 countries, we were on Workday 16, and just now in March, we've gone to Workday 24. And what that means is between the now and go live, there's been those 8 Workday updates, and every time there is a Workday update, new functionality gets added. And through they have a thing called a community, and as customers to Workday, you can go suggest enhancements, or they call it brainstorms, things that you would like to see either added or be done differently. And if enough customers vote on it, it gets put up and scheduled into the next appropriate update. And so whilst when we went live with the first 6 markets, there were things that didn't work for us. For example, one of them was bank accounts for international assignees. These are employees who, you send overseas on an assignment. In version 16, an employee could only have 1 bank account. And so either it was for their home or host country. And in Workday, I think it's 22, they released that an employee can now have 2 bank accounts, one for their home country and one for their host country. So that just gives an example of how it goes through. Another great plus is the language support. It already comes pre-delivered with the majority of the languages within our region, and so it's up to an employee just to change their preference to convert the language. We put time off. If I look at the main reasons employees log into Workday, the #1 reason is to apply for time off. And so in all countries, there hasn't been a time off plan we haven't been able to configure, and so it's a great benefit that employees have. Obviously, reporting and having the data there has been fantastic for all levels of management and through HR. And one of the great things that we found as we launched, we actually have a very high utilization rate. From launching, employees are in the system and they're using it and they're keeping it updated. So that's been great as we've been rolling forward. So that's some of the good things. Things that could have been better. I talked about policy harmonisation, and that will be your biggest body of work. Even though every time I approach a country, we've done quite a lot of policy harmonisation work, and they still say their policies are harmonised, we always end up finding that there are some policies that aren't harmonised. You know, some company will allow car allowance to this certain grade where the other companies won't. And so we could have done some more work in the policy harmonisation. Payroll integration has been hard. Out of all the parts of the project, this has been the area that's required probably the most amount of effort, and really part of the work is just getting our payroll vendors up and running. In a lot of cases, we're using local payroll vendors, and is getting them to accept a new integration format. Workday have this acronym, it's called PCOF, Payroll Input Common Output File, I think it stands for, Payroll Integration Common Output File. And really, that's the way that Workday speaks to other payroll systems. And, you know, obviously once you set up an integration, you've got to do the parallel testing, you've got to make sure it can all go through. I did have payslips as something that in a previous versions, you could not load external payslips, but you now can. That was introduced in Workday 23, so I can take that off the list. But integrating to any payroll system, no matter what HR system you're putting through, is a big body of work, and you can always do that better. The third bullet point, your data. No matter what your company say, their data will be rubbish. Like, I've gone through every single kind of company, and there is always work to be done on their data. So as long as you expect the data to be rubbish and you build that into your timeline, you should be okay going forward. There were some problems with some of the translations, but the Workday US team were really good. They got, so for example, in Thailand, we had some disagreements with some of the translation of the words. The Workday team got a few of the Thai companies together. Everyone agreed that, yes, the word should be changed, and then Workday would put through that. At the moment, there is only very few. There's obviously English on the mobile device, but Workday has a rollout plan for other languages on the mobile device. Security role restrictions. We're still working through our security role setup, and I can show you our security roles in a second. But for us, we're still trying to find what's the best balance with enabling, you know, the people at the coalface as much access as they can to fully do their job without giving them too much access that they can actually cause problems for other areas. And so we're constantly looking at our security roles to get that balance between it. And as I already mentioned, benefits management. I know there are other companies who have taken benefits a lot further than we have in J&J, and it's something that we should be looking at further in taking it forward. So in terms of, you know, the way that we set up Workday in our shared service, we have this three-circle approach, which is pretty standard across all industries. Our group is broken down into the bottom right. We have our HR business partners, and these are the group that actually works with the business and ensuring the business is, you know, got the right talent to deliver their goals. In the top, we have specialist groups, and these are groups like talent acquisition, like our recruiting teams, our global mobility teams, our total rewards or comp and benefit teams. And so these are the real specialists in those areas who help to define policy and to shape the way that group is going into the future. And then we have in the bottom right the workhorse, the HR operations team. They manage all the transactional, they manage the vendors, they help service the integrations as we go forward. In terms of the way that we set up, on the left there, those terms are like the Workday security role terms. There's a role called HR transaction partner by location, and that's really our HR operations team's security. And that team reports into a HR partner, which is the lead of the HR operations group, who reports into a regional operations group, who reports into a global operations group. And we have a case management system set up, and the majority of the cases are resolved at the bottom level. But as issues are raised and they can't be resolved within the country, they get escalated up the chain, and either they're resolved at the regional level. If the regional level can't resolve it, they resolve it at the global level. And so that's how it happens vertically. But horizontally, you can see there, I mentioned community brainstorm. At all levels in the organisation, we encourage members to log onto the community to suggest changes to Workday and to also use the community to hear what other customers are saying, as well as get ideas or fixes for problems that they've currently got. You know, part of the lessons learned in implementing our HR operations, obviously engagement with the right people at the right time is critical for success. Yet again, sorry, I keep harping on about policy and process harmonisation is foundation to setting off. And probably the way you think about it, when you start your implementation for your HR system, one of the first things you're going to sit down is start designing your processes. If you've got different requirements from different groups, it's very hard to come out with the same process. Clear role clarification very much helps smooth implementation. In everyone understanding on who does what and how the handoffs, one of the key factors, like the fourth bullet point I've got down there, is HR involvement in tenant review. Tenant review is a Workday term. It's like user testing, system testing. So one of the key success factors we had was when we do our system testing of the Workday system is we involve the HR operations team in that system testing. So the team that is going to be running the system in the future, we get involved very early in the project. The fifth bullet point is, especially not so much in Australia and New Zealand, but more in some of the other Asian countries, we get a lot of pushback about manager self-service, and it's kind of the feeling that managers are thinking that you're giving all your work to employees, or no, from HR to the managers. And what we're really trying to help them to understand is we got rid of the term manager self-service because it had too many bad connotations in our business, and now we call it manager direct access. And it's really trying to help the manager to understand, one, you can do this information or this transaction whenever you want. 24/7, it's there for you to do. And secondly, by doing it in Workday, you're actually providing less information than if you had to type it in an email or call up someone in HR and explain it over the phone. And so slowly our managers are coming to understand that. It is easier and quicker for them, but it will take time. Please don't have an expectation that your managers from day one will do 100% of transactions. And I would encourage, as part of your setup of your business processes, is to have the initiation step, have a couple of doors to start it. So you might say that, you know, we want managers to do comp changes, and that's a good process. We had that in J&J. If a manager wants to, if an employee needs a compensation change, the manager should request it. And that is our business process here at Johnson & Johnson. But we also allow the HR operations to also initiate it, because we know that there are some managers who know how to do it and they'll do it on day one, and there are some managers who will need help and we'll need to talk them through it. But because a comp change does affect an employee's pay, sometimes it's timely and we need it implemented, we need the process completed today, and therefore HR operations has to go in and do it. Otherwise, it's going to adversely affect that employee's paycheck. So I would encourage having a couple of doors in terms of initiation, but also, you know, very much encouraging the managers to complete the transactions. And then finally, you know, it's very friendly interface, very visible. It's been helpful for the users and easy for them to accept this tool as we go forward. And then look, just in the last minute, as I said, Workday updates its system twice a year. We have a release schedule. You know, we have a dedicated person who's responsible for managing the releases, and we have the same project plan each time. You know, what transactions do we want to test, who's involved from the countries, and more and more we're introducing automatic testing tools as we go forward. So just a little bit on that last bit. But with that, so I know it's been a lot of information in a very quick 25 minutes, but wanted to give some time to opening for questions. So I'll ask Craig, you want to open the phone lines? And are there any questions from the panel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, lines are open. Any questions over the phone?
Hello, Sanusi Tandy here from Lendlease. How are you?
Oh, good, thank you. How can I help?
Yeah, just wondering if you can share a bit about, the interface with the payroll system. What payroll system do you guys use?
Yeah, it really depends country to country. So Australia, New Zealand, we're using a system called Orion. India, we're using a system called Empower. Singapore. So we don't have, across our 14 markets, there is not one overlap in payroll systems. So we have an individual solution for all 14 countries. That said, we adopt the same integration method with all 14 payroll systems.
Okay, thanks for that. And then you mentioned about the pick-off issue just now. What is the workaround that you guys have implemented?
Okay, so just a bit of background. So you're just asking if you didn't want to use the Workday pick-off method, is there another method of integrating? Is that the question?
Right.
Yeah, look, you can do a custom integration. So the pick-off is the Workday generated integration. So it's kind of like, off the shelf, if I was to run a payroll integration, that's what's produced from Workday. Of course, you can do a custom integration to your vendor. So if your vendor says, no, I'm not going to accept the Workday standard integration, I want a custom integration, yes, you could go ahead and write a custom integration for that vendor.
Was that what you guys did with a custom integration?
No, we forced all our vendors to take the Workday standard integration, only because we're trying to reduce work in the long run. If Workday, because Workday maintain the peak-off, and so for every update, they keep maintaining it. If we were to write custom integration, every update, we would have to redo our custom, well, not redo them, we would just have to check to see that they're still valid. So, we used a very heavy suggested to all our vendors that they adopt the Workday standard.
Okay, thanks for that.
Any other questions?
Chris Phair from IDC. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. How can I help?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Number one, so I wanted to understand what was the system that you were using prior to Workday? Was it an on-premise system or a cloud-based system again? And if at all it was an on-premise system, what really made you to go for a SaaS-based solution? And number two is, what was the primary selling point for picking up Workday vis-a-vis any of the other similar systems that are available in the market?
Good question. So across the 14 markets, we had varying systems. We had SAP, and we also had like JD Edwards. So we went from ERP systems right down to Excel worksheets. And so it differed for each country. And so for us, it was finding a common system going across all those 14 markets. I was part of the team that went out and did the RFP, and when we were looking at solutions, from financial point of view, we're an SAP country. All our financials is on SAP. We did try to implement SAP HR before Workday, and it didn't work. And so because of that, we weren't really looking at SAP again, and so we were looking at other solutions. And by far, Workday came out in front for us because it was cloud-based. We didn't have to build an IT infrastructure. The speed at which we could implement and also the cost was very reasonable compared to the other vendors. And so for us, it was quite a quick solution in picking Workday. The problem it took is this was the first cloud-based solution that Johnson & Johnson has taken on as an enterprise. And so it's actually 6 months to put Workday through the compliance checks to ensure that all our data would be as secure as they said it would be secure. And so we did very, very thorough checks on Workday security to make sure that we were committing to a solution that had the security that we would expect on our employee data. And obviously it passed because we went ahead and started to implement.
Okay, quick follow-up on that. So you indicated that there was a compliance check that was done across your systems for how compliant Workday is going to be in terms of hosting the data. So was it done internally by J&J, or was a third-party audit and compliance firm sort of involved in this?
No, we have our own corporate internal audit division, and they completed the audit. There was less problems in Asia in regards to privacy in terms of, data being out of the country. EMEA in Europe, they have more problems with that. There are some countries that require data to be kept within either the EU or within the country. So in most cases in Asia, our privacy laws aren't that far advanced yet, but look, they took Workday through the ringer, and it came out on the other end. We did site visits, we visited their data facilities, we looked at the way that they updated their security and their change control process, everything in terms of passing the audit requirements in letting our data be off-site. Because, it's very, very highly confidential data, your personal data, and so it has to be passed correctly. There's a question there, did we explore success factors? Yes, we did explore success factors, but success factors being bought by SAP, and because of our history with the SAP not working, and the other reason, and I think it's, personally when I look at it, for those who don't know the history, one of the co-founders of Workday, Dave Duffield, was the co-founder of PeopleSoft. And then when Oracle did the hostile takeover, he went out and started forming Workday. And where we find that the difference in Workday, it's been written from the ground up as a cloud-based application, while where other applications have still got their ERP history, and therefore we really wanted an application that was written in terms of being a SaaS model, not something that has been converted over time. Any other questions?
Yes, Sanusi here again from Lendlease. Chris, sure. If you can share a bit, your experience, or more like your suggestions on IT involvement in the whole implementation.
Yep. Yeah. No. I normally bring that up because typically, I'm implementing. IT runs the project, and where it differs, and look, I think it's going to be a change now in all our companies, as more and more cloud-based solutions get introduced. IT has less of involvement in setting up the infrastructure, but they do have an involvement in terms of configuration. And I must admit, we struggle with this a bit in J&J. Who should be doing the configuration updates in Workday? Right now, our IT teams do the updates, but I actually personally think it should be more a HR IT team doing the updates. And when we talk configuration updates in Workday, we're not talking, writing program code. We're talking about going, and checking a box or writing a new rule as it goes forward. So when we first started, yes, it was a big shock for IT because, typically they run these projects, and this project stayed under the ownership of HR. But obviously, in our project team, there are 3 key leads. There's myself running the HR project, there's the IT lead, and then there's the payroll lead. And between the 3 of us, we obviously work very closely. And right now, the model is, in J&J, we have IT doing the config updates. But, I would encourage you to discuss what is the best model for the long term and how to manage the configuration. But from an IT perspective in terms of infrastructure, not needed. All we really needed to make sure in everyone in J&J is that they had a browser that was compatible.
Okay, that's great. And then if you can share a bit, Chris, during the implementation, you have data conversion, you have integration. How much did IT play a role there?
Yeah, definitely. So IT run the integration part of the project. How do I talk between Workday and payroll vendor. They run the integration work. Obviously, I support in terms of transactions and configuration of what information is going to Workday, but they run that part. And then obviously payroll run the part in parallel testing, making sure the results come out into the payroll system. In terms of other integrations, we have a global directory that we integrate to, and Workday IT own that integration, and then that global directory speaks to all other systems.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
No worries. What are the next modules you're looking to pick up in Workday? Probably the next module we're looking at is probably the recruiting module. Actually, before the recruiting module, we're going to look at the time and attendance module. At the moment, in any of my implementations, I kept time and attendance out. In a lot of the countries, I had manufacturing and warehouse, and they had like a clock-in, clock-out system. And when we went live with Workday, there wasn't a time system. Workday time and attendance got introduced, I think it was around release 18 or 19. And so right now we're looking at as one of our vendors for possibly doing Japan. I've had a look at it, it looks good. So we're doing the analysis of that. And when our Taleo contract comes up in a couple of years, we'll be looking at a Workday replacement. In terms of financials, we won't look at Workday financials for J&J. Our financial, Workday financials is really made for the service industry. We've got manufacturing, distribution, so we need the whole production management. We really need an SAP ERP for our financials to get, the cost for the customer. But, who knows where Workday will go in the future. So even from their spell, they'll talk about their model for financials is really for a service-based industry. Any other questions?
Can you hear me? Yeah, we got a question here.
Sure.
Okay, talking about this payroll integration, so when you say integration, what sort of integration is that? Is it outbound to payroll or inbound to Workday or two-way?
Yeah, so in most of the integrations, it's from Workday to payroll. So all the information in Workday going in as gross amount, it goes down to payroll in the gross amount, and then payroll system will do the gross to net calculation. The only integration we have coming back from payroll at the moment is pay slips. So in the payroll vendor, we'll create the pay slips, and we have those integrated back into Workday. In terms of absence, liabilities, and time off transactions, like annual vacation transactions, they also get integrated from Workday down to payroll.
So basically, like your leave encashment, your reimbursement, all gets integrated and gets posted to payroll. Yeah?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So when an employee terminates, their leave balance, or as you said, leave encashment, will get sent down to the payroll to calculate the employee's termination pay.
Okay, cool. And another one is you were saying you were streamlining the policies for HR and payroll. Is it within the country or is it across the board streamlining the policies?
So sorry, I just couldn't hear the last bit of the question. Do you mind repeating?
Okay, the question is you're talking about streamlining the policies for HR and payroll for all the countries.
Yeah.
So when you say streamlining, is it within the country or is it across the board for all the countries?
It's a good question. So within policies, our business processes are cross-country. So we adopted the same business process across all countries. And, I've been doing this for a while now, and I'll always turn up to a country and they'll say our business process is different. And sure enough, by the end of the meeting, they're not. Pretty much every country can have the same hire process, termination process, comp change process. But within those processes, some policies are different. And so definitely comp and ben is country related. What an employee is entitled to survive. And absence is also country dependent because most often absence is regulatory. Government stipulates what an employee is entitled to absence. And so when I look at it, I look at comp and ben and absent at a country. Everything else should be globally in nature is the way we manage it. Obviously, there are exceptions, but that's what tend how we look at it. Comp and ben and absence, country, everything else global.
Oh, okay. And so, as you were saying, that the product asset is the vanilla version without any customization. So, how do you define a customization for a Workday for implementation?
Yeah, so from what I heard, the question is you're talking about how does then Workday relate to these different country configurations versus the global, is that right?
Yeah, so is it like, how do you define customization? But because you were one of the points was saying there's no customization and it was rolled out as it is, so which means like policies for different countries, so particularly comp and ben, which is going to be country specific. How did you manage to get it done without?
Yep, I've got it. And so I'll give you an example. So we talk about time off, and Workday calls annual vacation time off. And so every country stipulates a different vacation rule. So in Australia, you're entitled to 20 days. In Singapore, you start off with 15 days, and then years of service, you get incremented up. And so whilst the actual time off type is different per country, so we'll have a time off type called Australia annual vacation. We'll have a time off type called Singapore annual vacation. The actual process for requesting time off is global. So if an employee requests time off, so I log into Workday and I say I want to take 2 days vacation, I tick 2 days vacation, they say what time off type am I using, and because I'm an Australian employee, I only see the Australian ones. I pick the Australian ones, and then it routes to my manager for approval. If my manager approves it, the process is completed. So that process flow, requesting time off, is global. Everyone has the same process, but the actual types within it are country specific. And that's exactly the same in compensation. The process for requesting compensation is the same, but the allowance plans, the salary plans, and the one-time payments are all country specific.
And we're talking about the multilingual support, like is it William often work on employee channels, or like which language will be still, or is it multi-level or team level?
No, sorry, there was just some background noise, and I just missed the last bit of the question.
Okay, the multilingual support, is it for the employee to choose which language to be shown on the screen, or is it a country-wise specific setup?
Yeah, so I think I have the question, and I'll answer it, and tell me if wrong. The Workday comes like text-ready languages, and when you log on to Workday as an employee, you choose your preferences, and you say, I want to see Workday in by Chinese. And you see that, and all the Workday screens will be in simplified Chinese. As a customer, we didn't have to do any translation to that. Obviously, if I create a field, I need to translate that, but the Workday core product comes already translated. And so, therefore, in terms of rolling out, very easy, and you don't have to do any translation. The only language that Workday doesn't support in our 14 countries is Bahasa Malay, and I think it's on the radar for the next couple of years. But other than that, you know, Japanese, Korean, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, it was all there. Cool. I'll just ask any final questions?
Great. Well, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks everyone for participating, and thanks for the great Q&A. I think there's some great insights there, so thank you very much for joining. We will make a recording of this available, so you'll be able to review some of the content that Chris had in there. So thank you again for joining. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.